All right, and welcome to the next panel at the Amtgard Leadership University here at Gathering of the Clans in 2015. This one's going to be locked in. We're going to be talking about creating and organizing successful battle games. With us today, we've got Gorin from the Kingdom of Dragons by Principality of Northreach, and to his left, your right, if you're viewing on the old TV screen, you're sitting in the panel as Kaads. And they're going to talk to us a little bit about how to increase the fun and the quality of battle games, because we're pretty convinced that translates to more people. The way that we're going to do things, they'll get things started with about 5 minutes of open discussion on their end, and then we'll start feeding some questions their way to see exactly what we can do to get the most out of this next hour block. So without further ado, Gorin, please.
All right. Hi guys, I'm Gorin. I've been playing Amtgard since 2000, and I think battle games are pretty much the key to any chapter's success from an execution level. So there's a lot of different things.
And we'll get to Brennon's introduction in a moment.
Right. So some conceptual things with battle games that are really important to understand. Not everybody really gets because they don't think about it too much. But when we play a game like Amtgard, we are essentially taking a very basic mechanic, which is tag with a stick, right? Really easy to understand, and adding a lot of extra rules to it that people don't always understand. And it's really important to understand that we are creating a common language, right? And we want to use a language that as many people can interpret as possible. So there are ways to do that. There are ways to do that, but simplicity is one of the biggest and most important things you can do to make your battle games better. There are lots of different variable elements in a battle game, and I might get a chance to touch on those in a moment, but this is probably the biggest and most common mistake that people make, is they add lots of extra rules that not everybody understands, and it gets confusing, and your games essentially suck as a result, because nobody has any fun. That's the end result, right? Everybody has a good time. So I know in my area, we try to create common language for our battle games. So a really good example is we have flags. A lot of people play capture the flag, right? We have very basic and very universal rules for what a flag means. So that all we have to say is this is a flag. Conversely, we have banners. Banners are just like flags, except they take 2 hands and you can't run. So we take all those complex rules and we put it down to one word that everybody knows and understands, and we don't change them. So if this is a banner or a flag, that's all we got to say. That makes it easy to understand, and if somebody didn't hear the read at the beginning of the game, they can say, is that a flag or a banner? That's all they got to ask. It's simple. So adding those kinds of like just language elements to your battle games can make a huge difference in complexity and ease of understanding. So that's pretty critical. Some other really important things to understand is just what a battle game is and who is playing the battle game. We talked a little bit in the How to Start a Chapter panel about diversity. It's really important to understand that if you want your park to be successful, there has to be a lot of people in it. And all those people are not necessarily fighters. So you have to find a way to create battle games that encourages success outside of the martial sphere. So I'll keep using the capture the flag example. A capture the flag game with a regular flag that somebody can just snatch and run rewards stealth, it rewards speed, it rewards lots of things outside of the martial sphere. And that's really, really important. Having strategy elements lets your guys who are thinkers get out there and be really, really impactful in their games. At the end of the day, if you have a chance to let every single person in your park be the hero, you've got a successful battle game. And you'll have a successful park as a result.
Okay. Kaads?
Hi, I'm Kaads. I'm from the Rising Winds. Been running games a lot, and I had pretty much the same opening speech that Gorin did. Keep it simple, stupid. Stole it. But to add to that, you could have an event, and you could be the main guy running games, and you could run very simple games, like capture the flag, node capture games, and stuff like that, with very little deviant from like the standard textbook games, and everyone would have fun. And it would be a successful event. So if you're going to add stuff to those games, complicated stuff that, like, you can, it's a very good idea to do so, but you have to justify why you're adding those things. You have to know, okay, this is going to add and not detract from the fun of the game. When it comes to simple games, sometimes they're not so simple, like capture the flag. Okay, is there a flag in the middle that you have to capture, or do you have to capture the flag from the other team's base? If there's a flag in the middle, then the team with the fastest sprinters will win, and not a lot of people will get that. Node capture games are easy, but are fun, but they're hard to run sometimes. You have to kind of figure out how the reads are going to communicate who owns what node. If there's like a capture the base game, you have to figure out where is the base that you're trying to capture. Is it right on top of the other team's respawn? Does the other team have unlimited respawn? Because then no one's going to win. And there's little simple things that you have to consider when running your games that a lot of people who are new to running games tend to leave out and don't think about it until it's too late and people are complaining to you. So.
Thank you. Brennon? More?
Hi, I'm Brennon, as Chris just stated. I look at battle games as primarily a vehicle to have fun. So first and foremost, if a battle game is not fun, it has failed completely and miserably, you should scrap it or something else, right? In the period that we're in, we're competing with people's attention from television, from the internet, from MMOs, board games, so card games. We've got all of these nerd outlets that we're competing with people for, and if we're not running games that are interactive, that are engaging, and that reward people for putting in the time and effort to show up, then they're not going to do so. So, the things I like to look at when I'm trying to conceptualize if this is a good game or if this is going to work is, again, first and foremost, is this going to be fun, right? Is it complicated? Complicated tends not to be fun. Anytime you have a complication, you have an opportunity for an argument. Arguments are not fun. Arguments kill parks. So if you've got a mechanic in a battle game that you're not sure of, the litmus test is this going to cause an argument? Yes, we'll do something else, right? The second thing that I like to look at is what is going to cause conflict in this game. And I don't mean conflict like people arguing, we just covered that back, but conflict in the sense of battle games are centered around a conflict. The conflict could be, as Kaads said, we're advancing a flag from point A to point B. It could be that I'm trying to shatter out a certain member of your team, like maybe your captain has 10 lives or whatever. But the point is there's an objective which both teams are trying to accomplish, and they don't have to be the same objective, although they often are. So what is our conflict? How are we going to get these sides to come together and hit each other? This is one of the big failings of shatter battles, right? Because there's no real conflict other than I need to kill them more efficiently than they kill me. All right, well, what does that actually engender? That engenders two teams staying as far apart as possible and not playing their guard, right? We've all seen this in shatter battles. You stand here, you stand there. These guys shoot at those guys. They're too far away. They don't get hit. These guys cast spells at those guys. They're too far away. It's very boring, right? So we want a conflict objective that's going to cause the teams and all members of the teams to engage in an enjoyable and fast-paced way. Okay. So as an adjunct to that, you need to think of, and this is something that doesn't get considered, but how many people am I going to have, and therefore how much space should I allot for this game? Battle games should not use all available space. They should use the appropriate amount of space for the number of people who participate. So if you've got 10 guys, you don't play a battle game the size of a football field. There's no point. You play something that's the size of a basketball court, maybe a little bit larger depending on what you're doing. Because what you want is you want to take that point of conflict and you want to put it in an area where all people can participate in it at essentially the same time from wherever they are on the field. So anyways, those are the types of things that I like to think about when I'm putting together battle games.
Okay. Glen, good morning. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to, a couple minutes, just some of your own thoughts and introspection as far as battle games.
Okay. Brennan actually hit a lot of the points in battle games that I like to bring up. And the biggest one, of course, one he just touched on most recently is people need a reason to fight. And it's even worse in games where there's multiple teams, like more than two. The classic 3-team shatter battle, one team doesn't play at all and wins, right? Because you're not playing Amtgard, it's hard to call it winning. But so you need something that drives the conflict, that drives the reason to fight. Another thing that I'm really big on battle games is objectives, right? An objective accomplished by things other than just murdering the team, right? I like murdering the team. That's my primary objective in your battle game, right? As long as I can do that and the people like me can do that, we're all happy. The problem is there's a lot of other players in Amtgard too. So what you're looking at is ways for other people to win. One of my favorite battle games is Domination. It's a fairly simple game. You get 6 sets of code, you spread them out throughout the field in different locations. It's an instant respawn game. The objective is to capture all the cones, or when 30 minutes runs out, have the most cones captured. And the way you capture cone, you just put your foot on it, count for 15 seconds, you get there, you put your color cone on top. Right? It's very simple, and the big advantage of that, there's two big advantages. One, if you're not a good fighter, you can still be the person who wins the game. And that to me is a critical aspect of Amtgard. Not everybody out there is a warlord or wants to be a warlord, is desperately trying to achieve warlord, whatever, right? There are a lot of people out there that don't want to be that good. They just want to come out, have fun, you know, hit their friends with some sticks, but they still want to be the hero. Everybody's the hero of their own narrative. So if you provide mechanisms in games where people can win the game without having to be a great fighter, pretty successful game. The other thing I like about domination is it breaks the battlefield up. So even if you've got somebody out there who's a warlord, they can't dominate all 6 points. They're too far away, right? So they can dominate 1 point and the other fighters can move around, right, and fight other points. It also scales well, right? I played that game with 200 people, right? We each used 8 points and actually broke it up into a whole bunch of smaller battles, right? It was all connected, but it divides the field up and gives the less skilled people a place where they can fight and accomplish. So another big thing I'm into. Brennan hit most of the other points, right? Things I like. Complexity needs to be low. You need to explain it in a few sentences, right? Sometimes you may have some complexity. You actually want to introduce a monster or you want to introduce something else. That complexity needs to be inward facing, which is actually a core idea also in V8, right? The idea is that spellcaster, if I'm a wizard, I've got all these spells I have to know, right? And all the incantations and stuff. But as the guy getting hit by the spells, I don't know anything. I have to know that your verbals are 30 seconds, your spell balls are 60 seconds, and I have to listen for the keywords to tell me whether I'm immune to it. And that's it. All that complexity faces the person who's responsible for it. And everybody else can ignore it. And so when you're adding monsters like that, you don't want to add a monster where they've got a different incant that doesn't have any keywords in it, and then has some bizarre effect. Because then all your players have to know that. And if you add 5 of those monsters, now people have to know 5 new incants and 5 new effects, and no one's going to remember that. And your value's going to fall apart. Mm-hmm. But you can give a monster a couple options, but make the incant standard, make the effects standard, right? What people are familiar to. And then you can have all that complexity without confusing your players. And the thing to remember is most players, it's not like school or something where they're like, all right, I'm ready to study, my brain's in learning mode. No, they're in run around in the heat mode, right? So they're not going to pick up things quickly. They're not going to try and retain things. That's not why they're there. That's kind of it for any other points.
Okay, so I just want to recap a little bit, that I think it's going to lead in a couple of the questions we've already got. So we talked, obviously, fun is the #1 goal, right? If not, obviously, people won't stick around. We need to create some kind of a why we're having a battle game, a conflict, and without keeping it too complex, something that offers a little bit to any Amtgard member. It's not just about the martial prowess that we talked about, Gorin. Maybe it's objective based. So anybody has an opportunity to be that hero, right?
Actually, can I throw in?
Yeah, please.
So, something I meant to mention is not, when you're designing a battle game, something that I like to do is just a mental help me out, is I like to go through all of the classes, and I like to think, have I accidentally marginalized a class? Have I set up a situation where it is no point in playing Archer because we've got a whole bunch of walls and no one can shoot through them? That's great, and there can be appropriate times for that if you warn people ahead of time, if it's part of a scenario or whatever. But it shouldn't be something you're doing accidentally because you just irritated everyone who spent $300 buying bow and arrows, right? You've made them not have fun. So be aware if you're accidentally marginalizing classes when you're designing games. Okay.
Hey, it's a panel. Go ahead.
All right, so just, there's something else I want to throw in there too. So one of the things to not be afraid of is having a variety of objectives. And you can take that too far, but as an example, like in every battle game that we do in my parts, there's a primary objective and generally 1, maybe 2 secondary objectives. And those are sometimes random, we pull them from a hat. Some examples for that might be, it's a capture the flag game. And we'll pull out of the hat that it's also a witch hunt, which means you score 1 point if you kill an opposing spellcaster. And we just put a reeve in each nirvana to tally that. It's 10 points to capture a flag, an extra point if you kill a wizard. Or you can combine a meat grinder with a capture flag, so that it's 20 points to capture a flag, and you get a point for every opposing player you kill, etc. Which is great, because if I'm out there 6 point war, 6 points of steel plate, and I'm a fighter, I'm not running around with a flag, so I'm not even worried about it, but I'm going to kill people. And that gives me a way to focus on what I want to do in the game and still have a good time. And you can do a variety of that. We've done as many as 3, where we'll have 2 capturable nodes, a flag that you can capture, and then maybe a meat grinder or something as well, where you get points for killing players. So you can include a variety of things, but make them simple and something that everybody understands.
Okay.
I would like to touch on the importance of props and flavor. And so given two scenarios, one, you have a node cap game where you have the nodes are represented by reeves. In order to capture the node, you have to touch the reeve for 5 seconds. The reeve counts you as having this node. Another example is that the node is actually a mechanism. We had this at last key, where you remove your team's flag, the other team's flag, and insert your team's flag. That provides so much more flavor to your game, and it makes it so the players don't have to worry about the specific rules of touching the reeve and stuff like that. It's very obvious when they get to the node what you have to do. Stuff like that, where whenever there's an opportunity for you to take out something like have a reeve do it, with have a prop do it, or have something like that do it, it'll make your game better.
Okay, so let's expand on that. So I'm excited. I've come up with a battle game. Maybe it's my first battle game, and I'm ready to be engaged with my group, and I'm ready, right? I've got this mapped out. It's werewolves, vampire, whatever scenarios you want to come up with. What's a good gut check as a game designer that I can say, okay, I've crossed it's a cool mechanism to all of a sudden it's complex?
It goes back to what Glenn said. Can you describe it in a couple of sentences? If you can't describe the battle game and the pertinent rules in a paragraph or less, you need to fix something. That's kind of my general. I mean, there can be exceptions to this, but generally speaking, if it's a normal park day and I'm describing my battle game and it's going to take me more than a paragraph, I've done something wrong.
Okay. Gorin, you had some?
There's a couple things with that. So one of the things I like to ask myself is, did I design this battle game because I really want to play it, or because I think the majority of my park would really want to play it? And that's a good check for me. And the other thing is depending on your park, now in my parks we play a lot of battle games. We'll squeeze in 5 in a day. I tell my champions, if you have a crazy idea for a battle game, awesome, run it. Make sure you run 3 other standard ones as well. So that if that one gets totally hosed and we just call it, it's not going to really impact the results for the day.
Is that okay? Can I just call a battle game in the middle?
Oh my God, yes, please.
I mean, sometimes we
Yes.
commit, right? It's like, no, we're going to play this. It's a 30-minute battle game, and I don't care if you're miserable or not.
No, as a reef, yeah, you should be able to just call it starting to win.
Kaads, you had some?
Yeah, I would also like to say that we're talking about simplifying your battle games to make it easier to understand. That doesn't mean we're trying to stifle creativity. Like a lot of people who want to run games, they read fantasy books, they play video games, and they have this huge creative mind with all these worlds in their head. And they want to express that in the form of running games. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to figure out how to make it simple for the players, but at the same time add depth to your game. And it's not an easy task. It does come with time. A good idea would be to start simple and just get some understanding of how teams interact with each other before you add more complicated or more depth things to your game.
Glen, you had some?
I got a bunch of stuff actually, because every time you guys said something, I wrote something new down. So one thing I think about calling it, right? It's always better to call than to try and fix it halfway through, right? I've been in a lot of battle games all right, these teams aren't even. You go to that team, you go to that team, and this team now gets one bark skin, and no, at that point, if the thing's broken, you can't fix it by just saying, all right, half death count or something. Then call it, run a new battle game, right? If people are getting grumpy, call it, right? Don't fix things, right? If it's already broken, throw it away, make a new one. Right? Battle games are free. By the same token, you guys run 5, that's insane. I'm probably going to do your park at some point now. You can check it out. But even my park's very stick jockey, right? Everybody there would like to ditch, right? Even our new players are like, oh, ditching's fun, which is probably partially just the culture. But we still run at least 2 battle games every day, right? And that should be your bare minimum, right? We aim for 3, right? And you should always aim for 3. And they don't have to be full battle games. That's something I got to talk about. Your battle games don't have to be full battle games with objectives and multiple objectives. One game we played last week was spellball dodgeball, right? I have all the spells you need to be an Elmo Barrage wizard. I got them all out and made a little, dodgeball court, put them all on the line, made sure everybody knew the incants, everybody knew the effects, and now every stick jockey in my park can play an Elemental Barrage spellcaster, right? And we played dodgeball, right, with spellballs, and it was a lot of fun, right? Our one interesting rule was that phase change you can't catch, or phase ball, rather, you can't catch, so that's a good kill ball. We had a lot of fun. We played that for an hour, right? We stopped ditching guys who only want to ditch to play spellball dodgeball for an hour. So your games can just be fun little pickup things. And you can do it small parks, right? Just because you have 4 people, we used to play Foursquare, 5 people, right? And basically instead of, I don't know if you played Foursquare, things that far back, right? You have a ball, you have 4 squares, you bounce to the person, they have to catch it, they can't go out, etc. Look it up on the internet when you have connectivity. You just say, kill him, he's out, you don't move up, right? You gotta make rules, it's kind of fun, it's kind of silly, right? It's a good thing for small parties. There's all sorts of incredible stuff you can do with only 4, 5, 6 people, right? You can do dungeon crawls with 4 people. You have 3 people play monsters, and you have them just change what monster they are as you go from room to room, right? And now you've got a dungeon crawl. You can't do that in a park with 50 people. Well, you can, get really creative, it's a lot of work, right? With 6 people, it's almost natural. So just because your park is small, doesn't mean you can't run insanely good battle games, right? If you guys want to interrupt, I've got a whole bunch of stuff, I'm just going to go through it. On the question of don't marginalize classes Brennan brought up, also don't make essential classes. I played battle games where we didn't have the class we needed to win. Right? The worst was actually a quest in 6.0 where we needed to have a black spell all. Serial annihilation. We didn't have serial annihilation to kill the big bad end guy. We didn't have a 6th level wizard. We found it out after an hour. We tried everything to kill this guy. None of the we need a serial annihilation. Well, we don't have one. So make sure you don't have essential classes. And it's not just that essential, but if you make a game that really makes one class super powerful, super essential, that's not a good idea either.
Okay, let me interrupt real quick. We've got a good pile of questions, and hopefully you can hit some of your points. But I want to ask you just like some 30-second, 1-minute answers to some of these, because they're pretty often, they're pretty common questions that are also addressed in other ways. So, Kaads, let's start with you, Rising Reigns. How do you encourage role play during a battle game?
Ooh. So I'm probably not the best person to ask that because I generally just have if I'm running a battle game, it's an objective-based battle game where teams collide and they're trying to win. If you're talking about a quest,
prohibit you from role playing?
it doesn't really prohibit you from role playing, but role playing doesn't really add value. Like if you think of like 2 armies. Boo! Boo! If you think about 2 armies clashing and one of the soldiers is trying to role play, you know. I do run quests, and quests are a great time to role play. Where there's monsters, there's encounters where I encourage the monsters to respond to role play positively. If a team tries to get through your encounter not by fighting, you could set up this entire fighting encounter with monsters and say, you have to fight these monsters to pass, and then the team tries role playing. I encourage the monsters to listen to the role play.
Okay, Brennan, here's a question for you. Again, fire around here. What's the best way to achieve team balance? How do I pick teams?
So the easiest standby that I go with is you nominate your 2 captains, make sure that they are not necessarily great fighters, but at least they're very knowledgeable. And then you have one of them choose 2 people, pair them up, and then the other person gets to choose which one they want to keep, and the person that was not kept goes to the other team. So at this point, if I'm choosing 2 people, my opponent's going to pick which one he wants to keep. My goal is to make sure that that matching is as even as possible. And there's some ways to jury rig that, and there's some ways to metagame it, but generally speaking, it's a great first step and it's real easy.
That's the most common method we use.
Yeah,
It's pretty effective.
It just goes real quick. It's like, all right, you pair 2 people up. Those 2, well, I'll take that guy. Okay, those 2, all right, well, I'll take that guy. And it works pretty well.
This one's for you, Gorin.
Okay. I like talking.
So, all of a sudden, champion's not there. My normal whomever it is, battle game designer is not there. But I got to throw together something because Glen said I will have 2 battle games every day, and I will have 2 battle games. How do I throw together something that's fun on the fly?
The easiest way actually is not to throw them together, just have a couple old standbys you play, right? If there's a couple games your park knows, they like them, you don't have to play them every week, but you can just whip those out, right? In an emergency, I always default to domination, right? It's quick, easy, I can explain to new people in 10 seconds, it's fun, done, right? Other than that, your goal in designing a battle is pretty simple. Make sure you have a couple objectives that aren't kill the other team. If you create a shadow battle, you failed. We're just shattering the team, and that's it. That's not a battle game. That's stupid. Make sure you have objectives, and then make sure you kind of pick the other things we point. Make sure your teams are balanced. Make sure that there's no marginalized classes, etc. And you can kind of just run through that real quick. And if you screw up, just cancel it and start another one.
Gorin, you wanted to add?
Just real quick, when you have a game that works well and your park likes it, write it down. Put it in a book. Give every member of your park access to that book. Now anybody can run a successful battle game because they've got a list of games that work, that everybody likes and knows. And that book can be 5 pages or 100 pages.
And there actually is an online list. It's like Games and Zucker or something on it. But if you look up Amtgard Battle Game book, it'll probably come up in Google results near the top. And it's got like 100 or so battle games in it. And so you just pull out your phone and look them up too. They're not all winners, but most of them are pretty good.
We'll try some of them are pretty good.
To the links at the end.
If I can comment on that. Something that I actually find really useful is if you actually just have essentially a battle game box for the park, and maybe that doesn't show up every time, but theoretically one of your officers should be there every week. And if it just has sort of some standard props in it, the props themselves will lend you to creating battle games. For instance, one of my standard props that I try to carry around is a 45-pound dumbbell, right? Because once you've got something heavy and uncomfortable, you're almost guaranteed for people to have fun with it. Right? I mean, you know, so we're going to, you know, add swinging swords to a possible trip hazard with pointy edges. That's enjoyable. People are going to have a good time. But, you know, and again, it also gets away from what Denny said earlier, which is if you can replace make-believe mechanics with actual mechanics, you're coming out ahead. It's easier to get immersed in it, and it's easier to enjoy. There's fewer arguments. So if you're saying something like, oh, you have to advance this object, and it's very heavy, so you've got to use 2 hands, why not just have a very heavy object that requires 2 hands to move for most people? It's funnier.
Yeah, but that means I have to haul it around.
Favorite car.
Yes.
To expand on that, one idea I got just from watching the Croatia guys was they had a capture the flag game and they used a fully inflated air mattress as their flag. And that's hilarious. It's awkward for one person to carry, 2 people can carry it. It just adds a game balance factor all to itself by just having a prop like that.
Stole it.
I was gonna say.
Oh, I stole it.
I'm doing that.
Shamelessly.
So, we're going to expand a little bit on the complexity because Gorin earlier mentioned like having a common language where a flag has a rule set, a banner has a rule set. Even the mechanisms that Kaads, you talked about. How do I avoid creating a new rule book? Or do I just create another pamphlet?
Well, you know,
how do you guys tell people what those are?
So in our park, we have something we call the Book of War, and it has all of it. It's online. And it's got not only all of our battle games, but all of our game elements. And because we run a lot of games that, you know, have objectives, and objectives probably aren't best laid out in the main rulebook, because there's going to be billions of them. So, like, you know, we have flags and banners. We also have, like, captains and generals. You know, we have one's a beefed up version. So there's 100 people on the field. A regular captain's not going to cut it. So having just an online resource where everybody can look it up and just communicating that stuff works great. One of the best things about having that common language, though, is that you as the org designer or the reeve don't have to explain it to everybody. The community will educate itself. If you get a new player that's like, hey, what's a banner do? Everybody already knows and they can share that information. And it's simple, it's easy to understand, so it's easy to communicate. And so they'll do it themselves.
Brennon, one of the biggest conversations seems to be, how do I figure out lives, and especially life counts and death counts? You know, whenever I'm doing a death pool versus, you know, B7, everybody gets 4 lives. But how do I address that? What are some considerations you take in?
Well, first of all, not everyone in B7 got 4 lives. There was some weird mathematical alchemy that went on there, but so just keep in mind it was actually irritating.
Obviously.
So when you're trying to work on death counts, when you're trying to work out versus durations and objectives, the most important thing to keep in mind is that for the sake of everyone's sanity and for the sake of the way that the rulebook is balanced, death should always be the worst thing that can happen to you. Okay, so when you die, that should be on the scale of, you know, good to bad. It should be bad. So if you've got a situation where taking a death is the positive or right thing to do in a number of situations in your battle game, you should reevaluate that in some way. So the way that I like to do that is, I really like life pool games, right? So that each team has a life pool. And yeah, you can choose to take a death if you get ice-balled, you don't want to sit on the 60 seconds. Perfectly fine. But you're still bringing your team closer to a loss, right? And as long as everyone understands that, then it becomes a tactical decision, and it's still the worst thing that can happen to you on a personal level. So as long as you keep that in mind, death should be the worst thing that can happen to you. Balance your games accordingly so that death has a negative impact for your team or has a positive impact for the opposing team. You're doing all right. The next part of that is that death should not have a terribly, terribly, terribly negative impact on the person's enjoyment of the game, right? So I shouldn't be sitting out for 5 minutes when I die. Obviously, that's real negative for my team, and it's something I would like to avoid, except that that's awfully shitty, right? So 60-second death count is, you know, typically about as high as I go. Now, if I go lower than that, I add some kind of negative to it for my team, like a life pool or an objective count or something like that.
Glenn, this one's for you. How do you deal with people who intentionally try to break a game?
I generally just, Ben's guy, I punched him in the face. No, there's really two ways to do it, because it depends how they're breaking it. A lot of times you can just incorporate it. A lot of people are trying to break the game, are just trying to win, right? And if there's ways for them to win, they're in the rules, they're going to do that, right? If there's things that are really abusable, don't put those in your game. Right? And the final token is talk to them, right? A lot of times just go, hey, stop doing this, right? They'll stop. So it really depends on how they're breaking it, right? Because the most common way it gets broken, right? I saw some recently in a couple of quests, PvP, right? You can kill other players. What happens is the rogue team gets bored and kills everybody and takes all the money, right? The way you can solve that actually works really well. Ask the rogues to stop doing it, right? Another option is just say you can't kill other players. You can only kill their monsters, right? I've done that a number of times where I've gotten a lot of people that are, if I PvP, they're going to intentionally just try and kill everybody and ruin everybody's fun. So I say you can't do that, right? So those are kind of your three approaches.
Kaads, you wanted to?
Yeah, so there's two kinds of power gamers. There's strategists and there's exploiters. You want to award the strategists. You want to, those are the people who work within the rules of your game. There are people out there who try to read the rules, try to look for something that you might have forgotten, and exploit your game. One thing I like to put as a disclaimer for all my games is that this is intended to be like a node capture game or this type of game where the teams are competing over this. If you see something in those rules that you think is outside of it and you try to act within those, talk to me first, because I have the power to just tell you no in the middle of my game. And don't be afraid of doing that. Absolutely don't be afraid of doing that. Because a lot of exploiters are really good used car salesmen. They're really good at presenting their point of view and trying to get you to change yours. Just don't be afraid of holding your ground.
Well, I like the fact it encourages it before the heat of the battle game.
Yeah, exactly.
And everybody, you're frustrated that you felt they tried to exploit it. They're frustrated because they had this master plan that you crushed. So I like the kind of approach. Gorin, you also want to.
I'll try to be quick, but I really like those people for several reasons. We talked about it a little bit in the last panel where it's really important to find a role for everybody in your park. I identify the people that try really hard to break games, and they immediately become part of my design team. And I design a new battle game, they're the first people to get to see it. And I say, hey, break it. And they will. And I'll be like, all right, this is what we're going to fix so that it's no longer broken. And they become a valuable asset. And most of them break the stuff because they enjoy thinking about games in that way. That's a mental exercise for them. They really enjoy it. And they can be pretty passionate about it sometimes. So finding a way to take that passion, that creativity, and incorporate it into something constructive for your park as a whole is a net bonus. So I use them.
Brennon, did you want to add anything on that one?
I have nothing to say about this particular one, believe it or
I
not.
actually wanted to tell you real quick, you mentioned, you talked about you get frustrated too. When you're writing battle games, you can't get frustrated. This is not personal. And the larger your park, like I've been a champion of parks as large as Grand Duchy, where we had 100 people on the field fighting, right? Somebody's always going to be unhappy or grumpy or whatever. You can't let that get you upset, especially if you're champion, because you're going to constantly hear complaining, right? No matter how great your battle is, you've been 90 on people who are like, this was the greatest day of my life. There's one guy like, you could have been better. Right? You can't let that get to you, right? It's not personal. It's never, well, it could be personal, but it's probably not personal. So you can't get frustrated. If they don't like the game, there's a problem. Got to, business approach. You got to be professional about it.
So Brennan, this one was earmarked specifically for you. So if death is bad, do you advise against unlimited life games?
Death is bad, do I advise against unlimited life games? I don't actually understand the question. Just answer the second question. Oh, do I advise against unlimited life games? I was treating it like it was a related statement. That was my.
I think it is, but I think it's just tied to earlier where you were talking about you want to keep death the most negative occurrence possible in a battle game.
So unlimited life games are perfectly fine and completely valid. The trick is that you have some kind of other objective, right? Because obviously both teams have unlimited lives, or one team has unlimited lives, or whatever. The objective can't be eliminate those people, which means that you're going to have some sort of objective, and being dead is going to be negative in some way that is not related to a life count or whatever. It's going to relate to the time it takes to respawn, or the time it takes back to your respawn point, or it's going to be, that your team has to advance an objective, and if you're dead, you can't move from where you died for X number of period of time, and then so there's going to be some sort of negative behavior or negative impact for your team, and being dead should still be the thing that most directly contributes to the other team having an advantage that enables them to win in some way. So it's, when you start getting into the gray areas of it and looking at the details of it, you can kind of take it as a rule of thumb, as a gestalt, but how you actually implement it, there's a lot of wiggle room to do that. So.
Real quick.
Keep in mind that if you're making it so that the biggest penalty is how far away the respawn point is, there are spells in V8 that can change the respawn point, like Heart of the Swarm or Golem.
Yeah,
So,
that's definitely true.
It'd be really useful.
Yeah, and that's what they're designed for.
yeah.
Okay.
That's why we get this done.
So Glenn, feeding off of something Brennan said earlier, but you also reiterated as far as addressing the different classes whenever you're doing game design. What about for parks where archery is not allowed for legal reasons? They just don't allow those kinds of projectiles in the park. How can you tailor your battle games to compensate for that imbalance when all of a sudden you're pulling out those?
I actually don't consider archery to be like the key class because there's a lot of projectile users. I mean, one of the big advantages of archers is, well, there's two big advantages in my experience. One is pinning arrow, right? Oh, that guy's got 6 points of armor and pro magic, you can't stop him. Pinning arrow, make him stand up, right? But the other thing, of course, is taking out spellcasters who you can't reach. If you have throwing weapons, things like that, that helps balance it. You are going to have a slight shift, but I think V8 is well balanced enough. Just taking out one class doesn't break the game, right? Every class has multiple things. It's not going to be ideal, right? And one of your options can be then to shrink the field, right? It's harder to run away from things. Also, you have objectives, right? If I have an objective, it doesn't matter that you can keep away from me because you don't want to leave the objective. Right? So if you can keep people pinned in place or keep people thinking, well, I'm going to stand 30 feet away from you and just do stuff, right? I'm the healer in the back who just instantly reses. You can't get to me because you don't have anything to throw that far, right? Make the field smaller, or make there a reason based on your objectives why they can't do that.
Anybody else want to go?
Yeah, I will say that absolutely V8 is balanced around the concept of there being bows and archers. Right? And that's just, if we wanted to have archery tightly integrated in a useful way into the fabric of the rules, we had to assume that it was going to be present, or at least possible to be present. And I'll just tell you, if you're in a park where you cannot use archers and you cannot use bows as part of your battle gaming milieu, it's going to throw off the balance. Because there are things that archers are designed to counter. And not just bows, but archers specifically. You can kind of get away with not having any other class using bows, although I think bow using assassin is the most enjoyable thing ever. It's hilarious. But pinning arrow, phase arrow they counter things real specifically, and they're valuable to have just as an option, because even if they don't show up on the field, they affect how people plan and strategize what they're doing. So I think you recognize that it is going to be a problem if you can't have those things, and then you look, well, what are they designed to counter, and is there some other way that I can encourage counters to those things? It's unfortunate, but kind of true.
Find a new park.
You find a new park.
Yeah.
One else week?
No.
Okay. So we're going to do 2 last rounds. This one's a real fast one. Just running from my left to my right, so we'll start with Brennon. Can you talk about your worst battle game experience, or at least that, oh my God, I will never incorporate that in one of my battle games?
That's like 20 years of bad battle games, man.
Well,
Shit.
we can come back to you.
No. Okay, so I actually participated in a EH Quest, which was run in 100+ degree weather in the middle of summer with no cloud cover whatsoever, and it was over probably a 20-acre area. So most of it was walking from location to location, doing nothing, being miserable. And then when you actually found a group of monsters, they would invariably tell you, well, you cannot engage us until you've done X, Y, or Z. Like, there was a very specific order you had to engage everything in, and it was not obvious. You had to figure it out like a combination lock. So we all quit because that was dumb. So, but literally, we walked around in the heat and the dust for 2 hours, and I got pissed off and quit. So that was bad.
Gorin?
I don't know if I can come up with a single battle game, so I'm just going to say V6 and just call it with that.
When I first started playing Amtgard, I was really drawn to the warrior class, got myself some plate mail, got all set up, and then spent at least 30 minutes of every game I spawned. I never died. You just sit there and be frozen.
So which leads back to the keep people active.
Gotta keep
Keep
them
playing
playing.
Emperor.
They gotta play. That's what they're there for.
Kaads?
It was actually a quest, was more recently, and it came off of the melee siege is bad idea. And in order to counter melee siege is bad, the designer designed monsters that had like verbals that no one was immune to, not even monks, and they hadn't limited those verbals. So it was basically the same thing as melee siege, where you're trying to design monsters that can just counter everybody. And whenever you try to balance like 5 monsters against 100 people by giving them ridiculous abilities, you're going to have a bad time.
Melee Siege was so bad I wrote it out the rules. This should be a hit. This is really
You shouldn't find a replacement for melee siege.
Go ahead.
Well, I feel like quests are too easy. I've been in so many bad quests. I've been in the walk around in the heat for, every objective is a mile apart, literally, because I have a like objective. I've been in the ones where the most so powerful. At one point, we were where we had to spawn one at a time. We were being camped by an extraplanar entity, a vampire, and 3 dragons. And of course, you spawn, so you don't have any spells up or anything. You just have to step out there and go, oh, look at those guys from Melee Siege. But to make it a battle game, the worst battle game I've ever been in was actually a game that had potential, right? It was your standard kill the other team's general game. Some of you played. So you have one guy in the team you're trying to kill. Until you kill him, it keeps respawning. As soon as that guy dies, the game's over. The problem was, it was instant respawns, and when we started wiping out the team, their general just moved back to their nirvana. You stood about 5 feet in front of it, but that's not enough time. There's an endless stream of people, right? And that game just became unwinnable. We got very frustrated because we clearly should have won, right? But we couldn't get to the guy, right? And that's the sort of thing where you have a scenario where if you get really close to victory, victory gets harder to get. That's good as a general concept, but it should never, asymptotically scale to now it's impossible.
So, regardless of what's already been said, just from each of you, and we're going to start with Glen this time, what's the one thing you want everybody to take away from this? This is to wrap things up.
The one thing actually is something I haven't mentioned yet, and I'll mention now, is, Brennan kind of mentioned props, right? Low profile cones, they're cheap, they're like 25 cents a piece, you get them in colors, get those. Because you can run a billion battle games, you have 20 or 30 of those cones, right? I have like 100 now, right? And I bought some for all the parts of my kingdom. Because with just 2 colors, you can play domination, you can have terrain effects, you can do all sorts of stuff, because now you have objectives people can step on, they're safe. Go buy cones.
All the stuff Glenn just mentioned, talk about preparation. Care about what you're doing. Go out to the store, buy things. Think about the games that you're going to run. Don't just show up at the park and be like, oh, I'm the champion, we'll run. Yeah. Think about what you're doing. Putting in effort is a lot better than putting in no effort.
A couple things. One, if you're in charge of running battle games, don't be afraid to ask for resources. The champion's budget is a line item in all of my parks. It's anywhere from 50 to 100 bucks a reign, and just buy stuff. They don't have to ask for it. The other thing is communicate your battle games. All of my champions, they're responsible for posting all the rules for all of their games by Wednesday before that weekend. Everybody knows what the games are. They've got their spell list ready, they brought out the gear they want to use. Makes it much more efficient to get your game started, which if you're playing indoors and you only have 2 hours, is critical to getting those games, make them happen.
You guys run 5 battle games in 2 hours?
Yes.
Impressive.
I imagine they drink a lot of water.
We don't do a lot of ditching.
Just imagine.
Ditching's what we do while the spellcasters get ready.
Brennan?
Again, the entire point is to have fun. If your battle games are not fun, do something else.
Hopefully everybody gained a lot out of this. Like I said, we've got to wrap things up for this time. A round of applause for the panel members. This is the second panel where, just reminding people it's about having fun and ways to encourage that and promote that all of a sudden. And parks bloom and you really don't lose, because that's why we're here, right? So thank you guys again for spending your time with us.